new platform for us, so I'm a little bit confused. And hopefully I'm coming through loud and clear. Can someone give me a thumbs up? Yeah, no, it's not just you, Chad. It's definitely me. All right, Philip, thank you. Yay. I don't want to tell you what the last 15 minutes were like, but total panic. Um, so, hey, Armichael, nice to see you, man. Cool. Well, we've got a new platform, and this is our first try with it, and a few curveballs, but we're here. Really glad that you're all able to make it. I'm gonna get lost in some of the buttons at some point, but hopefully we'll make it okay. So I see you all in the chat. That's great. And let's just go ahead and get started. All right, that's already the wrong slide. So what is going on here? Let me just make sure. All right. I just forgot to update the title. This is not the workshop. This is, we're talking about the API security market report, right? So this is something that we started working on at the beginning of the year. I bet a lot of you were involved in this. We sent out a bunch of surveys. We got about 2,000 responses from everybody. And we've been analyzing and cutting and slicing and dicing the data, and we've packaged it all up in a report. I'll give you the form to request the report later. It's really nice. It's, I don't know, 15, 20 pages of good content in there. And so thank you, Alex. Appreciate it. So that's what we're going to talk about here. All right. But first, I want to kind of make it interactive, right? So Shelby, can you please pop up our first call to action? Trivia. All right. This is a one question trivia. All right. Which is, what is the leading cause of API breaches? All right. It's a multiple choice. You can write in your own, which is cool too. But we're going to visit this survey later on and see how it matches with what the analysis produced. All right. So hopefully you can see the Let's Play button. Hopefully that's working. And then let's just go ahead and get started here. So we analyzed a bunch of stuff. We surveyed you all, and we asked a bunch of questions. So honestly, I'm just going to go through all these different questions and take a look at what the answers were and what kind of interesting colored commentary I can add to it. And what we did, just to sort of back up, we did a combination of surveys, right? Questions and looking at your answers and so forth. We looked at different size of companies and different roles of respondents. And then we also coupled that with our own breach analysis, right? So we actually looked at real breaches that have happened, and we tried to see, are there any patterns or lessons learned that we can get from all this data? So the first question was, what are you concerned about, right? And we asked a bunch of questions, and the thing that was far and away number one was data exposure. I think it was over 80% picked data exposure as one of their main concerns with APIs. And naturally, that makes a whole lot of sense, right? APIs are how we give access to data. And if there are any flaws or vulnerabilities, you could be exposing a whole lot of data. And if you've attended any of my sessions, that happens a whole lot, to the tune of millions and millions, even hundreds of millions of records. James, you're not hearing any audio. Is it just James, or are other people hearing me? Give me a thumbs up or something. All right. Thank you, Christian. All right, what else did we see a lot of? Account takeover, right? So APIs can be abused in all kinds of different ways, and one of them is to take over accounts. So that's a risk that folks have. Fraudulent transactions, right? If there are logic flaws, being able to trade on assets you don't own, or reset passwords, or really all kinds of different fraud. And then hacktivism showed up on the list as well, right? And we've actually seen APIs abused in Israel with the Red Alert app to send fraudulent alerts. We've seen it in Moscow with the Yandex app, where they sent hundreds of taxis in front of the Hotel Ukraine to jam up the city. This kind of stuff is happening. All right, so that's breach concerns. Let's keep going. So the next thing we asked about is, what kind of vulnerabilities have you experienced, right? So this is pretty interesting. Broken authorization, top of the list. Not too surprising. That's also OWASP number one, right? Can user A access user B? OWASP number 2 is showing up right there on number 2, weak or missing authentication. And frequently what we hear about is not like weak passwords or brute force or credential stuffing or no captcha. It's APIs left with the door wide open, right? So no security, no password requirement, no challenge. Lack of input validation, you see here. We got a little typo there. 42%, right? So are we doing the data hygiene, like, the data that's coming into our APIs? Are we checking that it's what we're expecting, right? If we're expecting a LinkedIn URL and someone puts in /Etsy password, that's problematic, and you shouldn't be processing that without checking it first. It's nice to see business logic show up here pretty prominently. Lack of rate limiting. You can see all our typos here. We were like literally putting the final touches on this in the last few minutes, and there's still a few touches left to go. But I don't know down there, 18%, 34% injections. So that maps pretty closely, frankly, to the OWASP top 10. Okay, so then we got what are some of the biggest challenges, right? And this one I thought was quite interesting. So right at the top, API security skills. Frankly, that's why APIsec U exists. So hopefully we're helping address that challenge, that gap that exists. But it's not surprising, right? APIs are getting attacked in all kinds of new ways, and our sort of traditional technologies and processes are just not really keeping these attacks at bay, right? So we do need to upskill a lot. Nice to see testing show up. Well, not nice to see. I think it's a reality that testing is a major problem. It's a big gap in how we defend and look for vulnerabilities in our APIs. And then down below, runtime protection, right? So what kind of real-time detection and blocking can we do on APIs? And of course, visibility, right? We'll have another survey question on visibility specifically, but yeah, we definitely know security teams are struggling with visibility. And if you can't get a complete inventory of your APIs, how on earth are you going to keep them safe and secure? So definitely a big problem there. For everyone that's complaining about audio issues, check out Shelby's feedback. Shelby's my right hand person here, so big shout out to Shelby for all the help that she's giving here. But if you're having audio issues, please check with her. All right, next up, what technologies are being used here to help keep APIs secure? So not surprisingly here, web app firewalling, pretty prevalent. I thought it'd be higher than 60%, honestly. That's a pretty mature capability, and so yeah, I mean, I would expect most large organizations are utilizing web app firewalls. A lot of manual testing showing up here. That's tough, right? It's hard to test APIs by hand. It's not like poking around in a UI. You got to write code to test APIs. And I don't know how you're going to keep up with development if you're doing it all by hand, right? You see down here at number 4, 39% automated API testing. Definitely that needs to come way up. Good amount of use of gateways. That probably should be higher, right? Less than 50%. Gateways are a great way to enforce control and establish governance, right? To have all your APIs managed in a central repository. And one of the best ways to do that is through a gateway. Surprisingly, runtime threat detection for APIs down at 22%. I think it's really challenging, honestly, to apply algorithms and statistics and these kinds of things to identify attacks in real time. It's the reason why a lot of these attacks make it through the web app firewalls, as it looks like legitimate traffic. Attackers are really good at trying to look like normal traffic, right? And so there you go. And then marketplace, 9%. Not too surprised that's a pretty low number, but marketplaces can be a really handy way to give your developers, your engineering team, a place to publish their APIs, to make them known and discoverable. And certainly that helps the security effort as well. Okay. Yeah. And indeed, James, layers of protection. You need them all. All right. It's not to say one is going to save you from all these attacks. All right. Next question that we wanted to talk about is your inventory, right? How good is it? So there's different ways to look at this, right? If I looked at, so you see here, like 16% no inventory, 25% claim they have a full inventory, or at least as far as they know. If I add 25 and 37, whatever that adds up to, 62. All right, so maybe 2/3 feel decent about their API inventory. Not enough. And then another third really, pretty weak here on the inventory. Curious to see those 25%. Yeah, indeed, Emil. Yeah, as far as we know, 25%, we got them all, right? But I think maybe this is just indicative of just level of confidence, right? And are people feeling like they've got their hands on their APIs? I've talked to a lot of security teams that will say, no, we don't have a clue, or we don't have a complete, or it's not good enough. And whenever there's like engineering folks in the room as well, they feel a whole lot more confident. They know what they're building. They know what they're producing. So we really love to see security and dev talking more and actually having a conversation about the APIs that are being built and deployed. And that's one way to build that inventory. Gateways are another way. If you just enforce all APIs got to go into the gateway, that's another way to do it. But deep down, this is a governance issue, right? So you've got to set standards and rules and policies in your organization and publish them and abide by them, right? And make sure no one can just stand up a random API that nobody knows about, right? If that happens, there's some breakdown in the process. All right, let's keep going. What do we got next? All right, so next thing we wanted to ask about is documentation, right? So it's one thing to know about your APIs, like do they exist? What are they? And then the next thing is to know, like, are they documented, right? Do we know what these APIs are doing, right? What endpoints do they have? What kind of data are they touching? What are the authentication requirements, and who even built it and where's it running? So here you go, right? 34% claim to have pretty good documentation across everything. You see down 17% only the external. There's a lot of partial, 29%, a few, 12%, 9% not at all, right? So this is definitely emerging as one of the glaring weak spots of this survey, right? It's revealing that our documentation is not up to snuff. And that's really problematic, right? It kind of defeats the purpose of having an API, right? Purpose of having an API is so someone can use it, whether it's another developer in the organization, or maybe we're sharing it outside to our customers and partners. Those constituents are going to need documentation. How on earth are they going to use your API if it's not documented? So it's really necessary from just a raw usability perspective, but it turns out that documentation is super critical for security, right? This documentation tells the security team, what is this API? Where is it running? What endpoints does it offer? What input parameters does it accept? What data does it spit out? Right? All that information is really valuable if you want to start creating tests, right? Or creating rules for the WAF or something like that, right? So, definitely need to see these numbers go up. We'll try this survey again in a year and see how it looks. Miguel, I wonder what type of APIs is in the 34%. Yeah, I wonder that question too. The way we phrased it was like, is, across all your APIs, right? Not just internal, not just external. People who are clicking on that option are saying they've got it covered, right? So, so there you go. David, I also consider API docs and PDF not documentation. I would agree with you on that. If it's not in in an industry standard format, open API spec, Swagger, something like that, it's just a website with some stats, right? That's fine for human consumption, but not going to help you from an automation perspective. That's for sure. We did actually cut this, Christian, across organization sizes. I don't have that handy here, but I'll make a note of that, Shelby, if you don't mind, and maybe we can add that info into a follow-up email. We actually asked folks, what size of organization are you in? 0 to 100, 100 to 1,000, 1,000 up, that sort of thing. So there we definitely saw patterns. where larger organizations were one way versus smaller organizations. Okay, so that's documentation quality. And then we start asking about testing approaches, right? So what describes your API security testing approach, right? So automated testing, every single release, 32%. That surprised me that it was that high, honestly. And I think what's in there, if I just were to guess, is it's not just security testing, it's unit testing, functionality testing, regressions, right? Like that kind of stuff that we're used to testing for releases. But organizations that I talk to one-on-one, it's pretty rare to see fully automated in the pipeline API security testing. Now, another possibility here is that we're talking about like static analysis, code analysis, right? Code reviews. That's believable. In fact, I think that would be way higher than 32%. But actual dynamic testing of APIs, I'd be surprised that good security testing is happening that much. We see a lot of manual testing on major releases, not minor releases. That kind of couples up with pen testing. Right, so a lot of folks are using pen tests to tackle their APIs. It's been kind of interesting. In the last few months alone, we've seen a ton of pen testers coming to us, having conversations and talking about their clients really focusing in on APIs, and that the balance has shifted, right? It used to be all web interfaces and mobile apps and that sort of thing. Now people are recognizing that they're all powered by APIs, and we got to be testing at the API layer as well. Bug bounties, APIs not currently tested, 8%. There you go. To me, this is support for what we've been calling the API testing gap. And I think it's pretty evident, right? There's a lot of room for improvement. Let's just take a look at the questions here. TTCN. All right, Mark, I'll have to check that out. That's an acronym I don't know. And from SBS, hey, nice to see you. We do have some industry vertical segmentation in here, so that's something we can take a look at as well. Maybe we'll do another session and do that. All right, what do we got next in our surveys? All right, this one was a cool one. This one was pretty glaring. So we asked people, where do you want to sort of apply your security? All right. Now I realize it's not an either or, it's a and situation, but we just wanted to ask the folks, where do you prefer to secure your APIs? And whopping 78% said shift left. Right. Let's start finding these vulnerabilities in the software lifecycle before they go live, before they get into production. That's a clear preference, right? And that was across the board, small companies, large companies, any kind of industry or vertical. We saw the same sort of results. And Seth, we did look at role types, right? So we had a lot of developers taking the survey. We had a lot of security people taking the survey. So it's a pretty broad spectrum. I'd say it leaned more on the security persona in this audience. And this preference felt like a symptom of marketing, Chad. All right, you can look at it that way. I think the reality is people do want to shift left, no question about it, right? Just anecdotally from the conversations I've had with hundreds of companies, for sure, that's what they want to do, and they want to find these vulnerabilities before they cause any problems. So to me, this is very much in line with the conversations that we've been having. Okay. All right. So those are the highlights from the survey that we ran. So I mentioned early on that survey, right? And so what we did was we looked at all these breaches that took place out there in the wild. Right, this is data these are breaches over the last few years, and what was really pretty sort of shocking is just the volume of breaches that have taken place as a result of leaky, vulnerable APIs. The volume of records that got exposed in these breaches, 2 million at Duolingo, 15 million at Trello back in January. on up to hundreds of millions of records exposed through. So it's not little companies, it's great big mature companies are seeing this. And to me, it's evidence that these API attacks are finding their way through, right? They're finding their way through. No kidding, David, 70 terabytes. That's not partner, that was Parler. We got a lot of typos to fix in here. That was Parler. Remember that like alternate Twitter or something? Anyway, they lost everything, the entire database, 70 terabytes. So what it says is that these attacks are getting through, right? Like all these big companies, they all had web app firewalls and threat detection technologies and SIMs and gateways. They were doing their code analysis and static and dynamic, and still these things are happening, like to this day, right? It's not like, they're not still happening. They're still happening. And so pretty significant. So then what we did was we looked at how these breaches were happening. And let me just take a quick peek. All right. So at this point, I'm going to, bear with me, I'm going to stop share for a sec. And I'm going to go look at our survey results that you guys just participated in. Let's see what you guys all guessed or provided your insight, not guessed. All right. So what are we seeing here? Let me make this bigger. Okay. So right there, weak and missing authentication. That's solid, right? That's OWASP number 2. Authorization, OWASP number 1, right there, pretty close neck and neck. Unknown APIs, leaked keys, rate limiting. Yeah, this is really pretty good summary of what we're seeing. But let me come back to my. Oh goodness, that's the wrong button. Bear with me. Share screen, window. Here we go. So we went and we looked at all these breaches, all of them. And we understood like what was the attack vector, how was the data harvested, all these kinds of things. And we looked at how the breach took place, right? And so interestingly, on the survey just now, rate limiting showed up very low. And actually, I think that's correct. I think what you're seeing here in our breach analysis is kind of misleading, right? You would conclude here that the number one issue here is rate limiting, right? If I'm seeing millions of records, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of records, right? At Trello, right? That attacker tried 500 million email addresses to identify 15 million matches, right? And they defeated all the rate limiting defenses, right? And for sure, and Trello admitted they have WAF, they had rate limiting, and somehow they got through. How? IP rotation, proxy servers. They were going through residential proxies that you don't want to start blocking. Attackers are creative, right? We know this, and they're going to find their way around the defenses as best they can, right? And at the end of the day, rate limiting isn't the core issue, right? It just makes the core issue worse, right? Instead of losing 100 or 1,000 records, you lose 100 million, right? But the core issue isn't that. The core issue is you have APIs revealing valuable data, right? If that's not true, then no one's going to try 500 million times or even 50 times, right? There's no interesting data. I'm not going to continue there. I'm going to go look somewhere else, right? And so what we found is the next 3 items, authorization, authentication, data exposure, which also map to OWASP 1, 2, and 3, those 3, one or more of them, accounted for 90% of the breaches on that prior slide, right? So if I pop back, 90% of those was a result of authorization flaw, meaning can user A access user B, authentication, which, to be clear, wasn't like weak authentication or bad password requirement or credential stuffing. It was no authentication, right? Like the door left wide open, and that happens a whole lot, right? And number 3, excess data exposure, right? Do we have APIs that are returning more data or sensitive data that is in excess of what the business requirement justifies? And where we saw those 1, 2, and or 3, that was the cause of 90% of the breaches that were out there, right? So to me, this is probably the most really telling finding of the whole of the whole survey, right? Was that if you want to dramatically improve the security of your APIs, where should you focus? To me, it's this. Let's make sure that we are evaluating our APIs to look for authorization flaws. Can Dan access Shelby's data, for example, right? Like run that scenario and see if it works. And if it does, you got an authorization problem. Authentication, this one's even simpler, right? Are we putting API endpoints out there that are left with the door open? And I think the reason why that happens at all is that there's a constant pressure on engineering teams to push out code, to push out features, new functionality, bug fixes, and there isn't always time to sit back and think about these things. And so that's one thing. The other is there's this general belief that APIs are kind of hidden, they're behind the scenes, they're not really, visible to the end user. And so who's going to find this API, right? Why do I even have to worry about putting it behind a password challenge or something like that? And of course, as you've seen here, attackers are going to look exactly for those APIs, right? We saw it at Peloton, we saw it at Duolingo, we saw it at Instagram, you name it, right? That's exactly what's happening. So it's not okay to assume those APIs are safe because they're behind the scenes and we don't need to put security. You really need to. And then from a data exposure, funny, Shelby, and from a data exposure, like if you take like Venmo, right? Their API was sending, was being used to show on the home screen like the most recent 10 transactions, right? And it stripped out all of the sensitive data, right? But that filtering was happening at the UI layer. The API itself was returning first name, last name, and all kinds of other sensitive information, right? And that's excess data exposure. Like why? Your API has to be tailored to the use case. And if your use case is send anonymized data, then the API needs to produce anonymized data, right? So the net here is OWASP 1, 2, and 3. The OWASP community definitely got it right. Those are the top 3 issues. And we really recommend folks really take that seriously. Like they really address these issues. Okay. Let me take here. User A can access user B. It depends. You can have an app where an admin can see. Fair. All right. So Alden, that's absolutely fair. So the other dimension on authorization is role-based permissioning. Right. So this is a really great comment from Alden. Right. So we have regular users and we might have paid users and other different types of users, but then you've got your people, support engineers, QA engineers, developers, security, admins, or whatever else it is. And you also need to be evaluating those roles and those permissions. And what we see a lot of times is permissions drift over time, right? And security teams don't get notified when somebody changes a permission, right? So that's another thing you got to monitor for. Like, what are the permissions by role? And do these permissions ever change without you knowing about it? That's a really great point here, Alden, as well. I knew I could count on you to come up with something really good. All right, so those were the major findings here. I'm going to summarize it here. I got a couple other things to share. Major findings, I've sort of beat this one to death. OWASP 1, 2, and 3. Really tackle those, truly, right? If you look at the actual breaches, this is where they are predominantly. It's not to say 7 through 10, or sorry, 4 through 10 aren't important. They definitely are. But you got to tackle these. You got to tackle them really well, and that will improve your security dramatically. I think it's really interesting that security skills showed up as the #1 challenge for security teams. We know APIs are kind of certainly from a security perspective, it's a new challenge, right? And if there's a cybersecurity skills gap, it's even bigger in API security. Right. So I think it's why APIsec University has really touched a nerve, and why we've seen 75,000 people register for the courses. So please keep taking those courses. We're going to keep making them. We've got some really cool ones coming out very, very soon. So you can all continue to build those API security skills. Number 3 is that strong preference for shift left. Mainly, like, let's just find these things as early as possible. My early career, I was an engineer at General Motors, mechanical. I'm not good enough to write code, and we had these signs all over the place. Like, if you find an issue, a defect in the design stage, it's $1. If it's in testing, it's $10, and on and on and on. It gets real expensive the further into production you wait to discover these vulnerabilities. So definitely, try to shift your security further to the left before production and into the software pipeline. And then, of course, the security testing gap, right? A lot of those things, especially OWASP 1, 2, and 3, you can test for that, and you can automate those testing, and you can wire it into your CI/CD. So these issues are found before they ever go live, right? And so it's not enough to do manual testing once or twice a year, or to sit down and handcraft tests when really we're talking about thousands of different scenarios, and we need it to be continuous, right? So those are the points on testing, and that's really the report findings. We're going to publish the report here. I didn't at the time we aired. I didn't have the link. Shelby, can you pop open the link? Oh, there we go. Yay! So we do have the form. This is literally got posted probably in the last 5 minutes. So you can click on that link. It'll take you to where you can download the full report. It's got all the details, all the charts and graphs and commentary and so forth. So I will, yeah. Oh, link is broken. All right. Is that the correct link? Oh, Shelby, looks like you got a typo. No? Shelby, can you put it into the chat, and we'll make sure we get that corrected. While she's doing that, I'm going to make the advertisement here for, thank you, Kishore, for APIsec rate limiting. We have seen rate limiting on links before, Michael. So that could actually be it, believe it or not. If it doesn't work, give it, it has 2 HTTPS. Oh, you doubled it up. All right, Shelby, looks like we got a typo in the link there, but it's correctly listed there. Sorry about that. You can tell we're still a bit rusty on this new platform, but APIsec, you might have heard about it. We decided to just dive right in and host our own API security conference. It's in May. It's all virtual, so you can join from wherever you are. It's all free, and there are no expos, no sponsors, no nothing. It's just awesome speakers who have all agreed to yes, please work, who have agreed to speak at this event. We've got incredible, Corey's going to be there, Confidence is going to be there, Gabby and Rana and Brenton House, really just an incredible lineup of speakers. And please go to apisecon.com. It will be, it's impossible to find a time zone that works for everyone. So it's kind of wired to East Coast time zone. So I'll be getting up hyper early that day. Some of you will probably have to stay up late, but we'll record all the sessions. So if you register, you'll get access, right? And I'll tell you, like, we launched this a week ago and we're at 1,300 registrants already. So this is going to be an epic event. So I'm really excited for it. And so please come and join us at APIsecCon. And that's it. This was a short one today, 35 minutes, but Thomas Dana Epp will be there. He's one of the speakers as well. If you'd like to speak, we might have a slot or two left, and there is a call for papers on APIsecCon that you can fill out. Let me know. And with that, thank you. I appreciate your like patience and understanding. Hopefully you're understanding as we get used to this new platform. And yeah, hopefully we'll get a little bit better at this as we go along. Thanks for all your support. Really, I will just say a little anecdote. We launched APIsec 18 months ago, Total crazy idea Corey and I had, and it has just been the most fun thing I've done professionally. And so thank you to all of you for all the support, kind words, encouragement, and for enjoying the content. It really means a lot to us. So, and I guess maybe the last thing I'll just say is if you, we do a lot of workshops for organizations. I do these probably 4 or 5 times a week. These are free, no charge, educational. But if you want your organization to raise awareness about API risks, then come talk to me. We actually have a link on APIsec homepage where you can request a workshop. But it's a really great way to educate the organization about API risks and what you can do about it. So if that sounds interesting, go to apisecu.com. There's a button in the top right, and you can do it there. All right. Well, I think I'll wrap up there. Thank you all so much. Hopefully, we'll see you at APIsecCon. Take care, everybody.